Amen. Well, as I said today, because it's a youth service, we're speaking, it's a little bit of a different one. I'm looking at different generations and this ever-changing world, as Georgie mentioned in her thing. And the world is changing at a rapid pace. So I've nearly completely embraced online shopping. I love, and when I say online shopping, I mean my supermarket shopping. There's a lot of people that are all for online shopping, but then when it comes to groceries, it's like, what kind of idiot would buy their groceries online? Well, I tell you, I love it, and because it's awesome. I just jump online, I type in what I want, and it's there. I've got one of those Google Homes sitting in my kitchen. When I'm cooking, this is how good the world is now. When I'm cooking, I just go, oh, darn it, I just used the last of the paprika. Oh, hey, Google, can you add paprika to the shopping list? Bang, puts it on my list. And I'll say that for whatever I'm cooking and stuff. When I'm thinking about what I have, I go, hey, Google, can you add chicken and mince to the shopping list? It does that, and I'm sweet. Then it comes time to do my supermarket order at the end of the week, or whenever I like to do it. I log on, type it in, bring up that list that Google had, and it's got everything there that I need. I'm like, this is awesome. I haven't even had to put pen to paper yet. Then I whack it all in, and then, even better, I drive. I don't get it delivered. I drive because I'm not lazy, and I drive and I pull up to the section where you go to get your groceries put in your boot, which is really awesome. I go over and I wait there, and I've got a kid, so it's great. I can put him in the car seat and I don't have to get him out, get the pram out, go in, juggle the groceries, all that. It's really good for parents, this online grocery shopping, but I was doing it before I had a kid. For a while I felt a bit embarrassed because I'd always take the number one park just to get in a good spot. And then this lady with a baby seat and all that would rock up. I'm like, oh, should I be doing this? Is this reserved for parents? But I just love the world of online supermarket shopping. And it's become so much something I've embraced too much. Now when I have to go for that one thing you forget, because you have to do a $30 minimum order, which is fine for your weekly shop. But when you realised you forgot to put an extra tin of diced tomatoes on the shopping list, like, oh, so you go. And gee, it is hard to find things in a supermarket when you don't shop at that supermarket. So anyone had that? Maybe you've moved house or you just go to a different supermarket because it's closer, and you just want one item and you're there for 20 minutes trying to work out where on earth it is in that supermarket. I try to go to this one close to work if I need one thing just because I know where it all is, until they flipped it a year ago. Anyway, that's another gripe I could speak on for 20 minutes. But it just shows there are so many things in this world that are changing. Shifts in the world as simple as online supermarket shopping are a part of the way that this world is changing at a rapid pace. Incredible. Things like COVID actually made a lot of this stuff speed up a lot more. A lot of people weren't adopting the grocery shopping idea until COVID happened, and then they didn't want to go into the shops. So the online grocery shop grew an incredible amount. Even to the extent now, you go to, particularly Coles has embraced the self-serve checkouts a lot more, and just about every checkout at Coles now is completely self-serve. I actually can't wait for the day when it's fully online and that you don't have to have a minimum order and there's no front door to the supermarket. It's just people packing your groceries, and some people at the moment are cursing me and thinking that this guy is what's wrong with the world. But I can't wait till that happens so that we just pull in, get our groceries and go. And it still hires people if they do the personal shopper thing. But that's just an example of the ever-changing world. And it's an example of what Generation Z, which I'll be talking about in a minute, and Generation Alpha are growing up in. It's an example of what the world is actually going to look like. And I don't reckon in 30 years it will be normal to go and do your grocery shopping at a supermarket. It might be quite weird. See, Generation Z and Gen Alpha are now in a world where leaving home is hardly necessary. So if you actually don't want to leave the house, you don't have to. You can get your groceries delivered. You can get menu log up and you can get stuff delivered to your house. Even if you live in the city, we don't have Uber in Mildura, unfortunately, you can get just normal things delivered to your house by an Uber driver, not just groceries or takeaway food, but you can get someone to go to the shop, buy that product you need, even if it's a wrench from Bunnings, they'll buy it and take it straight to your house. So leaving home is just something that we choose to do. You talk to who you want, when you want. Now this one sounds a bit weird and like you don't think the implications this has, but it's actually huge in how selfish we can become. Because now, because you message people you want, even if they move out of town or they don't go to your school, we're so connected to people that we just message the people we want to message, we talk to the people we want to talk to, and the people we don't talk to, we don't talk to. I remember when I was a kid growing up, we just had kids one day knock on our house and say, are there any kids at your house? We said, yep, and they were my new friends. And then we'd go to every house in the street and we'd just play with the kids that were there. I didn't get to decide who my friends were, it was just the kids that lived near me. So that actually has big implications as the world continues to go. Mental health is at an all-time high, particularly mental health issues, I should say. That's higher than ever before. Now, there's pros and cons to this because it's good that we're in a world that is so much more aware of mental health issues now, so people with mental health issues can get helped. But it's at an all-time high. So there's a real disadvantage to that as well. We're seeing more and more people, children, teenagers, young adults are raised by devices and streaming platforms. Devices and streaming platforms are just part of their everyday life, and kids are actually being raised on them, growing up on them, learning things about them, and all of that. Then we've also got the age of algorithms and AI. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but algorithms I'll go into. But AI, we're only just seeing the start of that, and this is the stuff that Gen Alpha will really be raised on, because they're going to see a world where you sort of just tell an AI bot what to do. I don't know if people are familiar with ChatGPT. It's the free open source AI stuff. I love it, because you can be doing something, I didn't write my sermon with it, but if I get stuck on a little bit, you can actually write a sermon on forgiveness. Hit enter, and I read through it because I thought, this will be garbage. It's actually pretty good. Read through it, and maybe I copy and pasted a few bits if I ever have to do a sermon on forgiveness now, I'm not sure. But it's just showing the way that the world is changing. There's certain things that we may not have to spend anywhere near as much time on than what we had to spend before. So there's a lot of power in understanding all this. This might be something you think, well, this just goes over my head. But there's a lot of power in understanding. So we need to acknowledge that the world is changing. We need to acknowledge that the world, for someone like Annalise that came up here, the world she grows up in is going to be so vastly different to the world that we grew up in. If you're someone here, even if you're 18 years old, I can tell you the age she's going to grow up in is going to be so different to the world that an 18-year-old grew up in. So we need to understand this. If we want to make disciples, if you're a follower of Jesus, we're called to make disciples. How do we make disciples growing up in that world? So we're going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to show you a couple infographics. I love infographics. They're just really cool. So the main two generations, because they're youth service, the main two generations I work with now are Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So Gen Z, you'll see, born 1995 to 2009. Who's in Gen Z here? If you can think, a few people, good stuff. So you're Gen Z. They're sort of the ones that are sort of dominating stuff at the moment, because Gen Alpha, the oldest of Gen Alpha, are only about 13. But just have a look at some of these things that sum up Gen Z. So they're born in that, where are we? Influential movies, Harry Potter, Shrek and Toy Story. So the animated movies, basically, or the age of CGI. All great movies, if I was to say so myself, actually. Used to learn new skills daily. So this one's huge. TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. 48% of Gen Z learn about things on TikTok. That's nearly half, isn't it? So think about maybe the boomer age generation. They mostly learnt with books and teachers at school. Now skills are being learnt by TikTok, Instagram and YouTube. Just if you're a millennial, so that's the one that's a bit before this, they actually use YouTube a darn lot more than TikTok, if you're just going generalisations. But I don't know if anyone's like this. If you're like me, I do this a little bit. If you want to fix something, say your lawnmower blows up, before I'm taking that into a shop to get it fixed, who goes on YouTube and goes, how to fix Ryobi ... lawnmower? Yeah, you do it yourself, don't you? Yeah, because I'm not giving anybody money when I can just go on YouTube and work out how to do it. But that's what this world's mind is like now. Where are we? There's some other ones, but just take some of that in. I'm not going to go through all of them. Top hopes: own my own home, have full financial freedom, travel the world. So they're very different hopes. Now let's have a quick look at Gen Alpha. These ones are a little bit scarier too. Now it's a slightly different infograph because they haven't concluded study on Gen Alpha yet, because their generation's still a little bit open for a couple of years. But Gen Alpha, they were born in 2010 and they go through to, it'll finish in 2025, Gen Alpha. Who's in Gen Alpha here? There wouldn't be too many in the room. Anyone that's 13? Who's got grandkids in Gen Alpha though? Yeah, there's a lot more. Who's got kids in Gen Alpha? Yeah, there'll be a few that have people in this generation. Now, this incoming technology one's interesting. So think about when you were born, what the incoming technology was. It could have been books. Maybe, just maybe, it could have been a computer. But they're well beyond that. An iPad was around the day they were born. And if you just look at kids in coffee shops and stuff now, you'll notice that iPads are still dominating the world. But then have a look at some of these other ones that are coming in now. 5G. They're a generation that doesn't have to wait for anything. And it doesn't have to wait for anything because 5G is pretty quick. And even now they'll complain that something's not loading even though they have 5G. And then we're getting all these weird ones that we don't even know the impact that they're going to have on the world yet. Biometric, autonomous vehicles, quantum computing and aerial ride sharing. We don't know what that's going to look like in another 15 years, but it's a bit scary if we think about it. And then outgoing technology. MySpace alphas have got no idea what MySpace actually is. I'd probably argue most of Gen Z wouldn't know what MySpace is. Who knows what MySpace is? So not many people in the room, because you're either too old for MySpace and you're wondering why people used it, or you're too young for MySpace. But then you have a look here, street directories out the door. Even MP3 players have gone out the door because Apple decided to merge MP3 players with phones and it changed the world. Who still uses CDs and DVDs? Oh, a few people, okay. There was a young person put their hand up then. That was real surprising. Someone gave me a CD for something. I actually didn't have anything to put it in. Didn't know what to do with it. Because I don't. I had to bring it to church. We got this plug-in one and yeah, it was a headache. Textbooks are almost on the way out. Desktop computers, their sales are going down. Credit cards. Who uses their phone more than their credit card? Oh, not many people. I do. I leave my wallet at home all the time. Wallets, analogue watches. So think about this generation isn't going to use most of this stuff. It's changing a lot, isn't it? It's crazy what is happening. So we're in an ever-changing world. I could go through this all day and have lots of fun, but we're not going to. I'm not going to preach for a long, long time. But just take some of that in. Have a think about what the implications of this world is and think, well, what about a young person growing up in this? What about a young person learning about Jesus in this? So this is an ever-changing world that still desperately needs Jesus. Followers of Jesus are called to make disciples, and that doesn't change. So it says in Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20, the last words Matthew, who was one of Jesus' disciples, records of what Jesus said, go into the world and make disciples. And disciples are people that follow Jesus with their whole heart and mind, and then they go and make other disciples. It's how the movement of Christianity is still going today. It's through discipleship. But what's required is a shift to the method. Because we can just see all this incoming technology. We're not going to be able to make disciples the same way that people made disciples in our age. When all of this technology and stuff comes in, just think about that one on the slide before. 48% of people learning new skills on TikTok. They think that of Gen Z, 46% of Gen Z actually use TikTok to grow their faith. So that's Gen Z Christians. But 46% of Gen Z Christians use TikTok to grow their faith. So think about how that's going to change the way that faith's being shared. You see, and what role do you think Jesus is going to play shaping this next generation? So the Word of God, one of the best things about this is the Word of God is more accessible than ever. And so is good Bible teaching. But unfortunately, it's a two-edged sword. Because where good Bible stuff, you don't have to go and ask a pastor at a church anymore to learn about the Bible. But at the same time, bad Bible teaching is just as accessible as good Bible teaching online. False information is more accessible than ever before. So as good as Google, YouTube, TikTok are, they're leading many young people search for their faith. Over half young people are learning about their faith through those methods. I find even just as a youth pastor, young people don't come and ask you the questions if they haven't searched them on YouTube or something first. The question I'm actually getting more often from young people is, oh, what do you think of this guy on YouTube? Is the stuff they share good? It's glad they ask those questions. But you see, all of a sudden, the age is changing. Professionals are sort of being taken away a lot in this world. So as a pastor, as a professional in the Bible is what you'd hope a pastor is. Young people are looking for answers themselves before coming to see me. It's like the lawnmower guy who fixes lawnmowers. Most people are going to try to fix their lawnmower on YouTube before they ever go to the lawnmower guy. I don't even know if that's a job anymore. It's probably going to die pretty quick. So this comes with a great danger, doesn't it? There's a massive risk of wrong information. And it's even common now, something that's big, particularly with Gen Z and millennials, it's common to build your own truth. So even older people do this as well. But for young people, truth is something that they're looking to build rather than something that's concrete. So I have to explain this a little bit carefully so you understand. But truth isn't just, oh, that's there, this is fact, it's real because it's truth. Young people hear something and go, oh, okay, I don't know if that's my truth. I don't know if that's true for me. So they won't adopt things necessarily because it doesn't sit well with them. They don't like the way it is. Where generations before are like, oh, well, that's pretty rough. Oh, well, I guess that's the truth. Opinions are becoming more concrete too. This is something, I don't know if other people observe this, but people are becoming more opinionated. They're having stronger opinions, and this one affects all ages. I'd probably say Gen Z and Alpha actually got the more open opinions than anybody. Because we have to remember, even though Gen Z and Alpha are growing up with this technology, we all live with it now, so we're all affected by it. So this is due, the reason opinions are a bit stronger now is due to algorithms. So I'll give an example of how this works using the latest referendum. I'm not talking about the actual issues of the referendum, just talking about it as a big political idea that came into the world and had a lot of stuff to learn about it. So your computer, your phones, your email, It has data. It learns you. So if you use a phone, any of those things, email, computers, it learns you. It learns about who you are. When you scroll through those 100-page things and just click accept because you want to install the program or use an email, what that is basically asking you is if it can use the data that you are putting into your computer. 99% of people click yes for this, or they try. Even the microphones in your phone, the card purchases you make, it's all learning about you. And these companies that you're purchasing stuff with, that you're using, learn about you. Now, a lot of people think that this is real conspiracy and it's real scary and the world we're living in, how can they know all this stuff? The way I see it, I don't know what a big company like Google wants with Joshua Cole. Like, they're not going to really come out and try and impersonate me. You have to be a bit more popular than that. You'll find it happens to some of the influencers and stuff. But what they do is they don't want to be corrupt with that information because they want it to sell to advertisers. They want to say, hey, advertise your product with us, with YouTube, Google, because we're not just going to advertise it on a billboard, we're going to put it on the screens of people that need that information. So if I want new shoes, and I don't know if this has ever happened to anyone, I'll say to my wife, I wouldn't mind some new shoes. Maybe I'll search Google, a couple of shoe brands I like. Then all of a sudden the ads that pop up on my stuff are new shoes. Sometimes I don't know if it's actually happening or not. Sometimes I reckon I think things and then I see it on my actual phone. Don't know if anyone else has thought that's happened before, but that's what technology is happening with it now. So it's no coincidence when that pops up. It's because your phones are listening to you, learning you, and selling for lots of money to companies that we will advertise stuff so that you can see this. So the world's changing rapidly, isn't it, for all of this? So the referendum, as I mentioned, just to give an idea of why opinions are becoming more concrete. So your phone, your social media, all of this stuff learns your data, right? It learns what you like. They don't like to put things on your phone or your devices that you don't like because it's all about getting the dopamine rush. It's all about getting enjoyment about what you use and thinking this thing is great. So what they do is they pop more articles. Say that you're someone at the referendum and you voted no. A lot of the articles that are going to go on your phone, on your social media, in your email inbox are all going to be pro-no information. And then the opposite's true as well. If you're someone that maybe your phone hears about it, sees what you're searching, all the articles that's going to pop up on your phone, on your emails and your social media is going to be pro-yes. And I'm just using the referendum as an example. This is the same with any sort of issue and all that sort of stuff that can form opinion. It's the same with faith as well, issues of faith. It puts articles that you agree with most of the time because it wants you to enjoy seeing that. So the danger, the reason I talk about this, is that the only way to get a balanced view on content now is that you have to do all the research yourself. You have to go looking for it and do a thorough job of looking for it to get a balanced view on things. But most people, I don't have a stat, but I'd say most people, when they say they've researched things, they've read an article about that, they're just reading the article that's already supporting their point of view because it popped up on Facebook or it popped up on Instagram or it was a TikTok video that you like. That's the danger of algorithms. Algorithms learn you and just give you the information you want. So your opinions, things that you know about, just become stronger and stronger and stronger. It's fascinating. So the only way to get a balanced view on things is you have to go searching for it. So what does this have to do with building disciples? I'm sure it's all interesting, but what does it actually have to do with sharing faith with other people? What does it have to do with being a follower of Jesus? And you might be here and you might be a follower of Jesus, and this has a huge impact on your life. You might be here and you're not a follower of Jesus. And I hope you can just get something from today where you can just ask a question like, oh, I've never thought about that, or I didn't know that was important. I hope there's something you can learn today. You see things like truth being built, one-sided information being more common, they create obstacles to growing up as a follower of Jesus. So before we look at some potential ways to respond to this, I just want to have a quick look at the Apostle Paul. So the Apostle Paul was alive at the time of Jesus, and then he went and proclaimed the truth of Jesus, told everyone about the gospel in order to save many people. And we have this story when he's in Acts chapter 17 we're looking at today, and he comes to this group of people in Greece and he discovers something, and we'll see that in the story. So I'm reading from Acts chapter 17 from verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Also some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." This was because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, and asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is and what you are presenting?" So he's talking about Jesus, And these Athenians saying, what are you talking about? What is this? Who is this Jesus? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means. Now all the Athenians and foreigners living in this world would spend time in knowing nothing but telling and hearing about something new. So you've got this group, Paul's in Greece, and there's heaps of idols around. Greek mythology, Greek gods are huge for why people would follow, and they had different representation of meanings and implications on your life because of all that. So Paul's in this. He's in this area and he's seeing all the idolatry in this town. And he knows that this group want to learn something new. So, well, I'm going to take this opportunity and tell them about Jesus. But I think there's actually a lot of similarity with upcoming generations at the moment. They're curious. They're curious like the Athenians were here. They're like, oh, tell us about Jesus. Tell us about this or that, fill in the blank. They're very curious about what other people believe when it comes to idols. It says in verse 22, then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus and said, Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. What therefore you worship is unknown. So he's pointing out, you guys don't even know what you're worshipping. You're just worshipping for the sake of worshipping. You're sort of throwing out a big net hoping you get something. From verse 24, the God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to us all mortal life and breath and everything. From one ancestor he made all nations inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for a God and perhaps grope for him and find, though indeed he is not far from each. So he's saying there is one God above all this. There is one creator of everything. He made the heavens and earth. He made the whole world. Paul preaches the gospel to these people because he sees they're captivated by there being something else. He sees they're yearning for something else in this world. There is a hole in their soul that they cannot find an answer for. And he knows that the answer these people need to know is the gospel. The gospel is the good news of Jesus. It's when Jesus came into the world, saw that he wanted to be in heaven with us, so he came into the world, gave his life for all the sin that you'll ever commit, and then he rose again from the dead. And in doing so, he defeated death, so that if you believe in Jesus and put your faith in him, you can have an eternal life in heaven with Jesus once you die in this world. And he wraps up, he says, for in him we live and move and have our being, as even though some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. Of this he has given us assurance to all by raising him from the dead. When they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, we will hear you again on this. And that Paul left them. So Paul knew these people desperately needed the gospel. They desperately needed to know about Jesus. A group of people looking to go from one thing to the next. What's new? What don't I know about? What can I learn about? What is it that I don't know about this world? They were sort of worshipping the unknown. You see, I see a lot of similarities in the generations coming through to this. There's a generation looking for the next thing that brings meaning. There's a generation looking for the next thing that brings more value to their lives. There is a generation looking for the next new thing. So you'll see something really popular, sort of religion's becoming a bit more popular with the upcoming generation. And they're more into even things like stones, crystals, or mindfulness and just inner self. There's a lot more awareness of what's beyond what we can see in this world. It's a different adoption to where the generations before that we haven't looked up today, they were quite big on even other things like there is no God, and atheism was huge there, where it's not as prominent with these future generations coming through. So I'm just going to share now 3 observations. I'm not going to say I've got the answer, otherwise I'd be able to make a lot more money at a lot of other churches to say I know how to save young people's faith, because it's a very big topic at the moment, and if you follow the things I follow, I suppose. It's because I get it on my social media, hey? But the first one is, if you're a follower of Jesus here today, the thing that we need to know is we cannot not exchange the truth that we hold on to. So we must hold on to the truth of the gospel. In a world that takes truth as it comes, a world that says, oh, I'll take this and that and mix it together and try and find the right thing, we cannot let go of the truth of the gospel, that Jesus Christ came into this world, lived a life that was perfect, died, and the most important thing of the gospel, rose again from the dead. We cannot That's the truth that we have to hold on to above all things. That cannot change, and that has to be the foundation of our faith, like we sang in that song, Firm Foundation. The gospel must be the firm foundation. We need to know that and know it well. We need to hold on to that above all other things. So you'll see a lot of debate in Christian world and circles now because they have different views about other parts of the Bible. And we need to do our study and we need to go and learn about this book as much as we can. But overall, we have to hold on to the gospel and the truth of Jesus, and that cannot change. That can't be something that changed. In a world where people are looking for answers, we can't be like, oh, well, Jesus might have come into the world. Oh, Jesus might have. We have to hold on to the conviction that Jesus is the only way to heaven. Jesus is the only one that brings us salvation. And that's a truth that we need. A lot of people, particularly a lot of people in older generations, hold on to things quite tight, where this generation holds on to it a lot looser. We need to hold on to the gospel very tight so that everything else around it can be formed. So we need to really hold on to that. Number two, just the second thing, we need to embrace things being done differently. Embrace things being done differently. And this one's particularly, if we want to see a rise of Gen Z and Gen Alpha in our churches, if we want to see a rise of Gen Z and Gen Alpha just growing in their faith, we need to embrace things being done differently. How do we as a church help a world of people who are confused about what to worship, confused about answers? And how do we, when we think about, we've got to think about what's important in this world too, and we think about the method of things that's being done. So the how. Do you think, just think about the way church is done at the moment. We have some songs, we do some announcements, we have some songs, we do a message about the Bible, do a song, we go have a couple with each other and go home. That's probably how church has been going for many, many years now. If you've been to a church in the last 50 years, I'd say most of them follow that similar format. And we have to wonder, will it still be the same in another 40 years? Or does it have to change a little bit? If 50% of young people growing up at the moment are learning about Jesus on YouTube, does that mean that we have to shape how we're doing it? If the generation even below that are learning about it on TikTok more than YouTube, then how would you feel about a TikTok church? How would you feel about a lot of Bible teaching being done on TikTok instead of a room of people who can talk about the Bible for a couple of hours, which is what a lot of people do when they get involved in small groups? So how do we feel about that? How do we feel about the fact that anyone can open a phone and learn about Jesus just from what they're doing? So there's a lot of implications, and as we change things to be able to shape to that and go to this culture, we have to think, am I okay with that? And we need to ask the question, as we see lots of things done differently, we have to think, well, what is it I'm uncomfortable about? Because people get uncomfortable with change. When things are done differently, oh, that's not the way I think it should be done, or that's not the way I think it should be done. We have to ask, well, what is it that I'm uncomfortable about that change? Is it because I like to grab onto the familiar, I'm nostalgic about what I've always been familiar with? Or is it because the truth is being shaken? So that's how you distinguish between a good change and a bad change when it comes to growing in people's faith. Does it affect the gospel? Does it affect how people are learning about Jesus? Or is it just it's not the way that I used to do things? We have to think we're in a world that's changing at a much faster pace than we accept change. You'll see this even with just tiny little things. If we do things like a big talking point at our church at one point was printing the mainstream fortnightly instead of weekly. And that was probably one of the changes I remember that got the most discussion about as opposed to other things. So imagine if we went to a completely digital mainstream because people don't read paper anymore. That could happen. In 20 years, that'll probably be the result of what happens. So we've got to think, was that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is there a way, we just have to think about the change and just embrace things being done differently. They don't have to be done differently. Just embrace it and don't just say, I don't like that, but think about the why, think about what's important and think about the purpose behind all those things. I'll just say have an open mind. Because even I see things now coming through from Gen Alpha and Gen Z, I think, that's stupid. And I sort of chuckle to myself. But then you just see it's changing so quick and so quick. I actually bagged out TikTok for about the first 2 years of its creation, and now I love it. But one little bit of advice I'd say with all of that is encourage over joking or encourage over mocking. So if you're talking to someone in Gen Z, if you're talking to someone in Gen Alpha, particularly with this generation, think about mental health. I didn't even touch on it, but anxiety is at an all-time high as well. It's something that is big for them. Don't say to them, oh, that's stupid. Oh, why are you doing it like that? Or what kind of loser learns about Jesus on TikTok? Or what kind of... So don't just be quick to judge with that sort of stuff. Because of the anxiety, because of all of that, that'll actually make them quite cold to you. It'll make them not really want to talk to you. It might actually make them go as far as not wanting to come to church because they're scared of a confrontation that might come with somebody saying that that's stupid. And this goes all the way down to their fashion, the way they express themselves, the way they speak, all of that sort of stuff. Be very careful with the way that you express and talk to people. And I think the best way around that is just always encourage. When you see a young person like that, encourage them. if you're concerned about the way they're teaching or learning about a truth that you know might not be a truth, you've got to have a relationship with them before you can actually condemn that truth that they're learning. So just encourage always, is be my advice with that. The third observation that I would say is deep discipleship is attractive. Deeper discipleship is attractive. When I talk about this, what I mean is young people growing up today, they are not attracted by people that just sort of have a met sort of a faith, a sort of a go to church on Sunday and then go back to my work week and not really worry about what the Bible says until I get back to church the next Sunday, if I go every single week. So the thing that young people are craving for, and I'm seeing more, and I think this is a real advantage of the next generation, why I've got a lot of hope for them, is they want deeper discipleship. They want to learn more about what's going on. If they're for something and investigating something, they go deep into it. And they want to see people living out their faith in a really bold way, living out their faith with their whole life, not just part of their life. Another way I speak this is young people really craving seeing authentic role models. So they want people living their faith in an authentic way. So if they say something, if someone teaches something like myself or it's in the Bible, and then they see me down the street not holding on to the truth of the gospel in a way or something like that, they think, oh, he's not really tooth-hair dinkum, and they lose a lot of respect. But they do respect deeper discipleship. Some people think we sort of attach what's true of our generation, and I think for millennials and boomers, and there was an element there where that sort of not deeper discipleship was tolerated a lot more, and young people see that and think, oh, well, that's not for me. So if people aren't completely sold out by their faith that they ascribe to, then these generations sort of look and think, oh, I don't know if that's something I'm really that interested in if they're not that interested in. So we've got to be able to proclaim Jesus in the way we live, not just the way we teach. We're showing Jesus to the next generation. But as I close, I just want to share the passage in Judges chapter 2, verse 10. So Judges is an Old Testament passage. The people of Israel were the ones who kept that message of God going through. And it says in Judges 2, chapter 10, it says, moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. So a whole generation grew up without knowing God, without knowing what God had done. So as we're talking about this ever-changing world, as we're talking about how we share faith with the next generation, we have to think, are we willing? This is the consequence if we don't do it. This is a consequence if we don't embrace a faith that they want to embrace. This is a consequence of maybe not even doing things differently. It's a whole generation growing up who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done. Can you imagine that? Think about your grandkids, your kids, your great-grandkids. Think about generations you know that are in that. And imagine if a whole generation, if I had to put up an infograph here and say, oh, that one there, though, in the outgoing technologies, outgoing technology was Jesus. We don't want to see that, do we? So we have to think about what that looks like in our lives. See, the how changes. That's something that will change. Think about my grocery shopping I said at the start. I still need groceries. Back in 1995, I needed groceries. Actually, my mum did it then. Back in 2008, I needed groceries. I went to the shops and I put them in a trolley and I bought them each week. It was mostly Doritos and chocolate, but I was 18 at the time. But now, in 2023, the how doesn't change. I still need groceries. The way I get them has changed completely. And you know what? I still end up with groceries in my pantry each week, but it's a completely different method. So it's the same with Jesus. The truth, the gospel we hold on to cannot change. We have to hold on to that in a strong way, but the method, how it's coming, how it's being received will change. And we have to be wondering, are we going to embrace that or are we going to reject it?